Good morning.
Well, that was it.
At least it's not as bad as what I did first. I feel like a weirdo.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our series on return, and I'm so excited to have with us Tiffany Fettig, who is, did I say that right, your last name?
Fettig. Yeah.
Fettig. It's not a Cajun last name.
No, not at all.
That's okay, though. We are so happy to have her with us. She is our newest team member and is going to be our Director of Discipleship. So this conversation that we're having here is just right in line with some of the conversations that she'll be having. So Tiffany, this is the first time that really the parish kind of gets to experience all that you are.
So sorry.
So why don't you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So Tiffany Fettig. I just moved here from Tampa, Florida. Living in Tampa for 9 years. I worked at a university there called St. Leo with a different father, Kyle. And yeah, worked there for 4 years, discipling women and men in their relationship with Jesus, walking with them very intimately out of drunkenness, out of premarital sex, etc., and just invited them into a life of freedom. And so I'm excited to be here to do that. I'm a military brat, come from two parents who served in the Air Force, and I thank them for that all the time, for their sacrifice to our family and to our country. And I'm very close with my parents. I have an older sister who's married to my brother-in-law, who is a saint. If he's watching this, yeah, you're welcome, Will. I'll send it to them. Yeah, so big fan of coffee, big fan of beer, big fan of bingo. I love playing bingo.
Bingo, that's so random.
I'm an old soul when it comes to some
like
stuff.
75?
I know, and I
Golly.
crochet for fun. It's like just the weird stuff. But I'm also like...
Hey, I think we have some parishioners that probably like bingo. So.
Then we'll have a good time playing bingo.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but beach girl, love to be with people, love to hang out with people.
Well, you mentioned Florida, and I know a lot of people down here love to make Florida their destination for their vacation plans.
Yep. Well,
in fact, many of them may be there right now. So
it's awesome.
Yeah. So beach girl, awesome. And now you mentioned that your previous university was, or your previous place where you come from, it was St. Leo University. So there's a common connection there. And then the priest was named Father Kyle.
Father Kyle.
And what was the
Smith.
mascot of St. Leo University?
It was a lion.
St. Leo Lions.
Go Lions.
I mean, you can't make this up, y'all. So this is just, it's really amazing, God's sense of humor, that he called you over here.
I know. Yeah, middle of nowhere, Louisiana.
To Cajun country.
Lafayette, Louisiana.
You've been here for how long?
Been here for a month.
Okay.
Yeah, a month.
What do you think of Lafayette so far?
I love Lafayette. I fell in love with it when I came here. So I came here in the beginning of May to visit some friends, as I've told you, Father. And like the second day that I was here, the Lord was like moving in my heart of like, I want you here. And I was like, oh, I'm in Louisiana. Jesus, you couldn't have picked anywhere else, you know? Like,
yeah, where we got mosquitoes and potholes. I mean, like,
awful
what more could you ask for?
Like getting away from the beach and going to a swamp. I like.
Perfect. I mean, I can't imagine any better decision.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, so I, where was I at?
Where were you at? So I asked how long have you been here? And,
for a month and a half.
And
I
you
love
said
Lafayette.
you enjoyed it.
I love Lafayette. I fell in love with the culture when I moved here. I love the Southern hospitality, the culture of like this Cajun, like let's like have people over, let's eat, let's drink, let's be in communion together, and
we call it the joie de vivre, the joy of
joie
life.
de vivre. There we go.
Do you know French?
I know Creole, Haitian Creole.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Well, that is not far from like Cajun French.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna say what I would typically say. I call it trash French because I'm like, it's not as beautiful as French, but
well, that's what people
like,
say about Cajun French.
Yeah,
because it's not Parisian French.
Yep, it's not Parisian French, but I can understand sometimes.
Wow.
But I'm more so like French people can understand what I'm saying more than I can understand what they're saying.
Well, you got one up on me. I don't know French, and I can always. It's so sad because that means so much to the older generation around here, and a lot of times they ask me, when they find out my last name's White, that doesn't sound very Cajun either. And then I always have to tell them that my mom's maiden name is Boudreaux. And you can literally visibly see their face like light up. Oh, okay. That means so much to them.
A name change.
And then, I know, but that just doesn't work because I like grew up over here. People know me anyway. And then they try to say something in French, like just a little phrase, and I'll look like them, like a deer in headlights, and I could just see their poor faces. They're like so disappointed. Like, you don't know French? What's wrong with you? So I'm trying.
Maybe
but
I'll
I do
be
know
that
joie
other
de
half for
vivre.
you.
Joie de vivre. And ça c'est bon. It's all
Ça c'est
good.
bon.
And I don't know. When in doubt, I just say bon.
Bon.
Bon. You know what that means?
Good.
Yeah, or yeah. It means good or yeah. Something like, I think so. Golly. They'll let me know if I got that wrong. Well, today we're talking about chapter 13. So we've had a few previous videos for those who haven't joined us. If you'd like to catch up on the previous videos, you can go to our website, stleolafayette.com/return. You can also go to our YouTube page or our Facebook page. But today's chapter is the second to last chapter, and we've already, just to provide some context, spoken about why people are leaving the church in previous chapters. And we've also spoken about some strategies that we can bring to authentically and with the Spirit of Christ invite them back. Mm-hmm. But inevitably, in those invitations and in that strategy, we are going to face some oppositions. And last video, we spoke about some personal objections. Today, though, might be, in fact, the most difficult chapter of all. So we're inviting you to the most difficult conversation because what we're talking about today is the moral objections that very often people see the goodness of the church and the beauty that it has to offer and the truth that it holds. But moral objections very often run deeper because it's difficult it requires perhaps a change within our own life, and so some of these issues are very sensitive. Some of them are attached to some political topics, so that just makes it all the more emotional and sensitive. So what we want to do is equip you with with how to respond to some of these moral objections. Now, this book does a very great job, so the best thing you can do is just read chapter 13. But we're just going to kind of unpack some of the highlights that we came across together. So Tiffany, I mean, we begin Brandon begins the chapter with the first objection that he kind of comes about a lot of times is just the fact that the church seems so judgmental. So I don't know if you've ever encountered that at all in your experience, but I do know that being judgmental or feeling judged is something that people that doesn't hit people very well. So what does Brandon say? How would you respond to that personally? Like, what is something? How can we respond whenever people say they just feel so judged by the church and by Christians?
Yeah. So also I've been here for an hour, so don't hate me all for.
Hey, we didn't waste any time.
Yeah, not at all.
Like, we gave her gift. We let her meet Leo, and now we're jumping right into like the moral objections of the church. I mean, golly.
I know, I wish Leo was like sitting on my couch.
Leo
sitting on me,
is probably going to come say hello. He's sitting on the couch next to us. Yeah, he'll get antsy in a little while, probably halfway through the video, and come tell us hi.
Good, praise the Lord. Yeah, so I first, when I was like praying through this and thinking about it and reading through it, my first thing that came to mind after I was reading this was, I love this kind of stuff. So like it's kind of funny that you gave me this chapter to read because this kind of gets into the nitty gritty of things, right? Like it gets into the hard stuff that not to combat, but to face in the day to day, especially with the way that society is currently. And so I just love it because I think that you can bring, like, there's so many places as us as Christians and Catholics can be so loving and kind and like generous to them, but like firm in church teaching and firm with the beauty of the church, right? Like firm in the sense of we have stuff to back up like why we believe what we believe, and I think it's beautiful, right? Like it's beautiful if it's said correctly, if it's said in the tone of voice, if it's said in the manner that should be.
Right.
So I'm super excited about this because I love this kind of stuff, Father. And
well, and that seems like a hard balance to strike. I mean, to be able to be firm yet loving and merciful, that almost seems like a contradiction to most people. So to really discover that balance, I can't imagine, like that's kind of the challenge that we have before us.
Yep, exactly. So with the moral obligation that you were talking about, why is the church so judgmental? And I think that there's two sides to it, right? The first side being that people are judgmental, right? We are sinful human beings, and that's the first place of understanding that we have to come from. So this is kind of to the person that is thinking about coming back into the church. It's like, welcome to humanity, right?
Yeah.
Humanity is sinful. Humanity isn't perfect. Humanity is not perfect, but the church is. Like, the church in herself is, right? Because of the Holy Spirit. And so it's, it's interesting whenever people say the church is judgmental, but they're saying that because they're coming from a place of, well, the church is judgmental because you don't let me do this, this, and this. Well, it's like, well, let's unpack that, right? Like, let's unpack why the church has these teachings, or what the word I was going to use was guards on us, in a sense. Like, why does the church have that? Right. And I think something as like a family member, because I have lots of family members who are not practicing in the church, who don't care to practice in the church, and many of them are because I feel judged by the church. And I think it comes largely in part because people haven't had first a personal encounter with Jesus Christ to where they can say, I've been looked at with mercy and compassion, to where then not that I don't care what other people think, but that I know that I'm accepted and loved by Jesus Christ himself. So that judgment that's coming from other people, I have to come from a place of understanding, right? Of like, they're sick. They're sick too, in the sense of spiritually, right? Like, if somebody is judging me for who I am, that probably means that they have something going on in them, right? And so I think, and then that's for the person that's trying to come back to the church, but then the people who are in the church, it's very easy to look at other people's lifestyles and think judgmental things. Or, oh, bless her heart, like she needs to get her bottom end back in the church because she's, doing X, Y, and Z. Right. When the reality is too, like, we have to come from an understanding heart in the same sense, right? Like, we have to be open to not the to the person and not to the sin, right? So that's like what I think Brandon's talking about a lot, is like, you can judge the action of the person but not their soul. When Jesus talks about judgment in the Gospels, I mean, it's written all over the Gospels about don't judge your neighbor. What I think the church teaches as well is that don't judge the person, judge the sin, right? We know we can say that somebody having sex outside of marriage, that is a sin, but that person is not damned to hell because of that sin. We have to judge that sin and not that person. So we have to be understanding and compassionate to that person. And if our whole church were like that, and we had this understanding heart, I think we would see more people coming in to then experience Jesus Christ.
So I mean, you drew the line. I love, first of all, that you acknowledge like the humility of saying, you're right. We are all judgmental because we're weak and we're sinful. But with that said, we don't like that about ourselves, and we're seeking to be less judgy in that sense. But I love that you also made the distinction of judging the person and judging the action. And the church has always been very hesitant to judge a person because we simply don't have the authority to do that. Yeah, and I think when we start talking about these other moral objections, that will come up, and I'll probably say that multiple times because, and I'll even say it now, like, I can understand why women get abortions. Women who are single women they don't have any support around them. I can understand from a humanity side why somebody would do that. Do I think it's okay? No. Would I ever invite a woman to do that? No. Like, absolutely not. I am pro-life. I am going to be pro-woman. I will adopt a child from you, right? Like, that's my mindset, but I can understand
why in the past people have or people are active in it now if they've never had an encounter with who Jesus Christ is, right? Which we can get into that on that moral obligation.
True though. I mean, like that. In fact, I think he mentioned somewhere in this, I can't remember where in the chapter, but if we lead with morality, then chances are we'll probably harm the relationship and distance them further from Jesus. But if we begin with Jesus, and if they have a real encounter with Jesus, well, then morality suddenly becomes a fruit of that relationship.
And it's natural. Like, the morality aspect is just a natural part of it when people have had that encounter with Jesus. You know, I mean, I walked, and to be honest, like, Father, if we would have talked 5 years ago, I would not have the same answer that I had now, because 5 years ago, I was my first year of ministry. I knew who Jesus was, and I was harsh. I was very harsh. I was like, no, not okay. Why are you doing this? Stop doing it. You know, instead of having this first heart of understanding and compassion, because that's what Jesus did, right? Like, anytime in the gospel that Jesus is correcting someone, it says Jesus was moved with compassion, or Jesus was moved with pity, like towards the people. So it's like this first, like, he comes from this his heart is in this disposition of understanding, to then be able to correct in a loving way. But like, for me, I wasn't coming out from a place of understanding, compassion, or pity. I was coming from a place of correction, and just correct, like, only correction. And so a lot of the women that I was just correcting, I was very harsh, and like, they didn't come back. They weren't coming back to the church. And I just had this realization only like 4 or 5 months ago that that's the way that I was 4 or 5 years ago. And I ended up calling some of those women and apologizing for not loving them in that moment, and not first, like, inviting them into a relationship with Jesus. And my ministry changed after my year of that. Like, I had understood, like, okay, wow, I think I'm too harsh. Like, you know, Lord, what is that? And the Lord spoke into it a bunch, but
that makes me think of when I was in seminary. I had the great opportunity to really dive deep in spiritual direction, and to kind of enter into a process of healing from some of my past life. And I remember coming face to face with my sinfulness, and how just shocking and debilitating that was, discouraging it was to, like, kind of really see my sinfulness. And I remember how beautiful it was for my spiritual director to tell me, you know, this is such a good experience for you, because it will become a source of mercy. And so I just hear that in your voice, like, it whenever we experience, like, come face to face with the reality of our own sinfulness, now we have a heart of compassion that can fuel all of these difficult conversations, and kind of be the beginning and the end of all of these challenging conversations. So that just kind of what that made me think of. But, you know, you mentioned abortion. So I know that's not the very next objection, but since you mentioned it, that might be a good flow. A little while later in the chapter, he does bring that up. He brings the objection of contraception and abortion. And, you know, and I really was struck by whenever he said that, you know, surveys show that majority of sexually active Catholics, married or unmarried, probably have used contraception if they're not still using it. And then there's a huge number of people that disagree with the Church's stance on abortion that are Catholics. So, and we see this right now in our political debates. And so, how do we grapple with something that's so sensitive? You know, because you mentioned it also has a lot to do with just women, and how do we love women who are going through a difficult circumstance?
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, where do we begin? This is such a big,
it's huge
discussion. There's no way we can cover all of it, but maybe just to get us started on the conversation.
Yeah. So a couple, I guess, key points that I think of whenever I have this conversation about contraception and then also abortion. My first thought is, from a strictly health point of view, neither one are good for you, right? In the sense of, like, a woman's body. If we're going to talk about what is good for a woman's body, contraception is not good for your body. I don't care what you're using it for. It's just not good, right? Like if there is something going on with your body as a woman that doctors are telling you that can be taken care of with contraception, there are other ways to deal with those and to fix that. So that's my first, because I, to be completely frank, was on it when I was in high school because of things going on in my own body, and I was told this will fix it, but really it just put a Band-Aid over it, right? So I put a Band-Aid over it, didn't fix it, and so now I'm older and having to like learn how, okay, this is not a good thing that I was doing in high school. It actually probably ruined me more than it did anything good, but I have incredible doctors that helped me, you know, move into more natural ways of things. So praise the Lord for that.
The Lord.
Sorry if that was TMI, y'all, but welcome.
Well,
just being really frank. I mean,
being frank, day one, you know, we're just jumping
welcome.
right in.
Me to a T.
No, but I mean, in some sense, sure, maybe TMI, but probably not, because honestly, I'm sure there's plenty of young women and old that could probably relate.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of women, you know, who have been on it or have gotten off of it because of just the side effects of it. It's just horrible for your body. I mean, so that's strictly from a scientific health perspective, that it's just not good for you.
Which is probably a helpful place to begin in many places, because to say, oh, the Bible says, you know, it's not against it, is not very convincing for a lot of people.
Sure.
And but to show them, like, you know, actually a lot of science does support that this is a dangerous drug.
Yep. Exactly. And I think that's my point of view on actually both of these things, is whenever I do have conversations with people about contraception and abortion, I typically stray from even talking about God or the church within it, because I think people are so apprehensive and they push back so much about it, that I come from a point of view that is human and from a morality standpoint, but not necessarily from the church. But I think whenever you're trying to tackle these kinds of situations, you first have to come at it in the same way that Jesus came at it to everybody else, like compassion, understanding. If we don't have compassionate and understanding hearts for these people that we're having conversations with, we shouldn't be having those conversations, because realistically, we're not helping the situation by getting angry or frustrated or judgmental or rude, pointing the finger. If we first can't look into ourselves and say, well, why am I being so judgmental towards this person? And then fix my ways, of being then compassionate and loving and understanding, this conversation isn't going to go anywhere,
And yes, I love that. And you're reverencing their humanity and their potential past. We just never quite know what someone's been through. And, you know, sometimes you may be speaking with someone who has secretly had an abortion. And what we know now is that there are some real sufferings that happen afterwards. They call it post-abortive syndrome, similar to PTSD, where so we really want to reverence that and definitely come in with a heart of mercy, instead of just an academic debate. You know, so
because that's not. I mean, that's where the understanding and compassion comes from, because if you can understand like why a woman, not that you would do it, but if you can understand why a woman in her life would choose to have an abortion, then you can come at it from a point of view of like, okay, then if I can understand that, then this conversation is going to be better off, because I can relate to you more and I can chat with you more. Because the reality is, I think too, when it comes to abortion, contraception is a bit more of a conversation that I think is a bit easier to tackle, because we can talk about NFP, we can talk about more natural ways that you know, women and men can practice to live into what the Father's will is for their families. But abortion, so that's why I say whenever I talk about abortion with people, I come at it from a human to human kind of conversation, rather than like, well, the church says, like church teaching says, because people all the time in conversation will say to me, well, you don't have the right to choose for another woman, which is always my favorite argument, because I'm always like, oh, yes, we do, you know? But in the sense of, if we were talking about your right to go outside and kill somebody, you have that right, you have that choice to do it. But you have a consequence for that action.
Right.
And it's the same thing. Like if we're going to talk about killing another human, if we're going to talk about the morality of that, then somebody killing another being is on us. Is on us to take care of that, right? It is our responsibility as a human race to pay attention to that. So if a woman wants to, this is not me saying that you should do this, but if a woman wants to use unnatural contraception with her and her boyfriend, that is, do I think it's okay? No. Do I think that it is would I invite somebody to do that? No. But I don't think that somebody should have a consequence for doing that, nor do I think it should necessarily be illegal, right? But if I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, do I think it's okay for a woman to have a choice to abort a child? No. Well, why not? Because then we're talking about murdering someone, right? We're talking about this moral act of killing. Yeah. And so if it was, do you know what I'm saying by that, Father? Like,
no, what I hear you saying is that freedom is not absolute.
Correct.
And really the fundamental problem with abortion is that we're talking about more than one person's freedom.
Correct.
So in the sense that one person's freedom is now becoming the stripping of freedom from another.
Right.
And so whenever that happens in any example, like murder, like slavery, like abortion, now we have to just acknowledge that freedom is not just the absolute ability to just do anything at a whim.
Right.
But that freedom comes with responsibility.
Correct. And we have a responsibility as a human race to hold people accountable for morality, in the sense of if we as a society think that murdering someone is not a good and it is not from the Lord, then we have to respect that in all different cases. But then that's when you get into the conversation of, so realistically, the conversation of abortion can't even happen until you first discuss when does life start, right?
Yeah.
And I think that really comes down to the conversation. And
but that's such an easy conversation to have if we're going to be honest, because science just emphatically affirms embryology. Textbooks all say that life begins separate from the father and the mother at the moment of fertilization. So we just know. I mean, and even popular society will often bring up, when the woman doesn't want the baby, it's a fetus. But when the woman does want a baby, even pro-abortion people or celebrities, when they want the baby, suddenly it becomes a baby, that they're pregnant with a baby. So it's not consistent. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, you cannot really argue that life doesn't happen at conception.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's really easy to enter into. But I think just the power of moral objections is there's something going on much deeper. We do need to be firm in our truths, but at the same time, like somehow we have to pierce the heart as well.
Oh, sure. And I think that, again, it comes down to, for instance, I know lots of Catholics who are okay with people having a choice. Yeah. And I think a lot of Catholics who are okay with having a choice, it comes from a place of trying to be compassionate and understanding towards the person.
Right.
Which I don't fault them. I understand. Again, I come from a place of understanding, but
desire to love and to be merciful.
Exactly. But again, when it comes back to that moral issue of murder, that's where we can that's where it's a very sticky situation, and that's where it becomes very black and white. No, this is not okay because it is murder. Yeah. You have the choice to go out and do what you please, but when it comes to murdering someone, it's a whole different ball game. Right.
So how can we equip those who are watching them for these conversations? There's so much that can be said. It's an ongoing conversation, but what could we do maybe right now to summarize for our viewers? If you encounter somebody who feels like the church needs to get with the times of contraception and abortion, maybe what's a rule of thumb to guide that conversation?
Right. Well, I think something that I always come back to is the church. The church is a source of good, is a source of life, is a source of beauty, and so because of that, she's protecting women, reality, and that goes into the other moral opposition that we have, which is they oppress women.
Yeah.
And reality is the church teaching on asking women and the church teaching on abortion is actually freedom for women. Is actually this freedom for a woman to live into what it means to be a woman. I just walked with a woman a couple months ago who found out she was pregnant from her boyfriend in college. She was Catholic, was in a Catholic student union, and found out she was pregnant from her boyfriend in high school, and her first thought was to have an abortion. And she was going to go through with it. And I found out about it through a friend, and I didn't know the girl at all. And I told her, give her my number. I want to talk to her. And, X, Y, and Z. So I chatted with her, and I just told her, we'll call her Nancy. I said, Nancy, I will do anything for you right now in this moment. Whatever money you need, whatever, if you need support, if you need money, if you need, I will adopt your child. I will walk with you. I will house you. I will feed you. I will do anything for you, and I will walk with you before you have your child and after you have your child to support you however you need to be supported. I will do that. I will do that, and I want you to know that I will do that. And I told her, I said, and if you wouldn't want to give it to a single woman, which I don't know if I could actually take a child from you, but I said I have multiple families, some of my best friends and their husbands, that will take this child so easily into a loving family, a kind family that will support you, et cetera, et cetera. And that caused a conversion in her heart. But why did that cause a conversion? Not because I was direct with her or whatever. It was because she had an experience with who Jesus Christ was, which is exactly what Jesus says to the woman on the side of the street who is thinking about having an abortion, who's pregnant, right? Which is, I want to support you, I want to love you, I want to give you everything to be able to have the most abundant freedom. Because we see now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Rachel's Vineyards, we're seeing these post-abortion, what do they call it? Post-abortion PTSD in a sense. It's the traumatic stress disorder.
Right. PAS, post-abortive syndrome.
There we go. We're seeing those fill up. I mean, constantly now, because women are having an abortion, and then whether it's a couple weeks later, a couple hours later, or years later, they're experiencing this humongous guilt, and that there's no freedom in guilt. That's totally not from the Lord. Guilt is not from the Lord. So I think when we're talking to these people, when we're talking to even other Catholics who are like, I just couldn't believe that somebody could have an abortion. It's like, well, no, I can't understand that. But I want more for those women. So how can I support those women? Where am I in my life supporting these women? Do I have situations in my life where I can be supporting these women? Whether it's donating to Catholic charities, donating your time to Catholic charities, whatever it may be. But these, there's so many things that we can be doing as Catholics to continue to support that. And we always take them back to the heart of Jesus, which is he cared for them, so as Messiah.
Love
that. Makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. That's just so good. I mean, it's a difficult conversation, and I definitely encourage you to just really dive deep into this actual chapter to see Brandon Vaught, in addition to everything we've said so far, offers some great resources for further reading if this is a particular issue that someone is wrestling with. But why don't we spend some time now on another major moral objection, and one perhaps that might be, in my opinion, the greatest in our current cultural context. And that's namely, he has two separate objections that are kind of saying the same thing, that the church hates gay people, and or the other objection being that if I'm gay, I can't be Catholic. So we're just getting, we just had Pride Month this past June. From my perspective, it seemed like this particular Pride Month was just more visible than I remember it being in recent years. Maybe that's just me, but...
in Lafayette specifically, or in general?
I just noticed through the media and also through social media, that I just noticed a lot more conversation about it. Maybe that conversation was happening, it certainly was in previous years, but it just seemed like it was happening a lot more this year.
Right.
So I just say all that just to show us that it's certainly a hot topic and one that's difficult for us to navigate as Catholics. But I've heard you speak outside of this video, just a particular passion for this issue. So where do we begin? What can we say?
Yeah, so again, I'll say this as I begin every moral opposition or objection, which is we first have to look to that person with pity, with compassion, with love. If we first cannot look at people with compassion and love, we're never going to be able to invite these people back into a relationship with Jesus, which then leads to back into a relationship with the church. Yeah. Because whatever your thought process on being gay is, whether you think it's biological, whether you think it's happens from when you were born, a mental disability, a mental unstable, whatever you want to call it. Whatever your view is on that, doesn't matter. What matters is the person. So if somebody has cancer, I'm not going to treat them differently because of what they have going on to them. I'm going to love them. I'm going to be compassionate and have pity towards them because they're a human being and they deserve that respect.
Absolutely. As all human beings deserve. Exactly,
correct. So I think when we talk about this, a lot of people, the first thing that it says is the church hates gay and lesbian people, which...
That being the objection.
Correct.
That's not what Brandon says.
No.
Right.
I'm sorry. The objection is the church hates gay and lesbian people, which is totally false, and obviously, we can say that all day. But we have people in the church who act that way, right? There are few and far between people in the church who are homophobic, who are against these things, and so first, again, I would say that we have to look inwardly and say, what is it that bothers me? What is it that is rubbing me the wrong way? And we have to come to terms with what is actually our place in it, and then we have to move from there. So, if that makes sense, does that make sense?
Well, yeah, you're just you're re-emphasizing what we said earlier, that before we enter into the conversation, we have to first examine ourselves and face our own sinfulness and our own weakness, so that we can enter into any difficult conversation with humility and grace.
Right. And so I think if we're talking specifically about moral objections that come from within your own family, like your daughter or your son are struggling with these tendencies, that the first thought comes back to what you said that Brandon does say in this chapter about you can't hit things with the just the facts. You have to first, as we were saying, love them fully at first.
And connect with their heart.
Correct, exactly. Because if people haven't had an encounter with Jesus Christ, if people have not been led to an encounter with Jesus Christ, there's no way that they are going to walk back into a Catholic church and just start worshiping again.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, it happens. I'm sure sometimes people have whoa, that happened, I'm going back to the church. But majority of the time, it's all about accompaniment. It's all about it's all about walking with one another, right? And so I played softball my whole life, and
you didn't mention that in your intro.
Sorry, I played softball my whole life. I was a catcher.
Softball's big over here.
Is it?
Oh, absolutely. In
nice.
The South, softball's big.
Yeah. So. Softball.
We have a great softball team at UL, and
that's what I've heard.
Oh yeah,
which I'm excited about because I love to watch it. But I went to college to play, and big fan of it. But I had my conversion, and Jesus is now my God. So that's a story for another time. But so I grew up with a lot of women who were lesbians, who called themselves and considered themselves a lesbian. And I had many conversations after my conversion with them of Tiffany, would you come to my wedding if I wanted to get married to the opposite sex or to the same sex? Tiffany, would you still love me if I wanted to date another woman? And at first I was like, oh my gosh, no, you can't do that. Again, it came from this just very factual point of view. But now, as I've grown in my relationship with Jesus, it has come to this, no, I love you for who you are. Again, I don't love the sin. I don't love your way of living, but I love who you are, right? And That's where we have to focus. Like, I think if we're talking about like how to draw your child back to the church, you have to start with that. And I can't emphasize that enough. The love that you give them before any fraternal correction, before any correction that you give them, you first have to love them. And I
it's foundational.
It's 100% foundational.
In fact, Brandon says it's the beginning and the end of the conversation.
Correct. Yep.
Now,
and
lest we forget, there does need to be a middle
right.
stage at some point in that relationship
right.
where you talk about the truth.
Exactly.
But the love does have to be the bookend.
Correct. And you can't just preach to them, well, this is what the church teaches,
right.
because the reality is their relationship with the church is broken,
right.
and there's not a relationship there. So how can we expect someone who doesn't have a relationship with something to follow it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as parents, like, we have to, I'm not a parent, let me put that out there. As parents, we have to be active in that, but then active in our accompaniment with them. So loving, supporting them, comforting them in times that we need to. But when it comes to specific, like, the church hates the gay and lesbian people, what I think is beautiful is that no matter if you're gay, if you're lesbian, whatever you are, you're still able to walk freely into our church.
Right.
And a beautiful example that Brandon gives in this book is this man who he would walk, I guess there was this priest at his parish, and every day this man would walk in and he would walk around all the different statues in the church and he would weep, and he was super theatrical, kind of he was a gay man. He was very theatrical in the sense of like how he was talking to the statues, how he was with the statues, like of these saints, of Jesus, of Mary, and he, you know, would weep at them, and you know, everybody knew him because he was there every day.
Yeah.
And the priest stopped by one day and, you know, was talking to him and said hello to him, whatever, left him, and then I guess a couple weeks later he hadn't seen him in a while, and he came back and he saw he was saddened and was just weeping at the feet of Jesus, the statue of Jesus. And the priest asked him, why are you weeping? Or not why are you weeping, but like, I haven't seen you in a bit, you know, what's been going on? Long story short, and forgive me if I'm wrong for misquoting this, but his mother had died and his family had requested that he not attend the funeral. And because it would confuse his family. He came from a Baptist congregation, and it would confuse his family because of him.
Wow, let's just pause for a moment and just take in how awful of an experience that must have been to be told that you're not allowed to attend your mother's funeral.
Right.
Can you imagine?
Mm-mm.
I just can't even imagine.
No, I can't. And I try to see it from two point of views, right? I try to see it from his family's point of view, coming from
right.
a Baptist congregation. They were probably coming from a place of trying to challenge him
mm-hmm.
and being like, what you're doing is not okay, you know? Do I think they took it too far? Of course. Like, I don't think you should ever stop somebody from going to another funeral.
Right.
But I think if we can look at it from, again, having compassion and pity for the other side,
right.
of being like, well, why would they have done that? And understanding, like, they were probably doing it to challenge him. Do I think that's correct? No, but that's probably what they were doing. But anyway, so so while the funeral was taking place, he came to the Catholic Church, and so I'm just going to read, if you don't mind, I'm going to read this little piece that he said. But he said he told the priest that all of his life he had been objected of derision and mockery, and he had known very little kindness. But over the years, he discovered that the one place he could go where he knew someone would be kind to him was the Catholic Church. And if someone wasn't kind, he found the kindness in the faces of the plaster saints.
Wow, of the statues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I think it's really beautiful. And then he goes on to tell the rest of this, which is that the man gets really sick, and so he stops coming to the church. So the priest goes and finds him, and he was gravely ill. And so he's at his home. He's on his deathbed. He would die alone, and there would be no church to bury him if the priest hadn't gone to visit him. And so the priest offered like a funeral mass before he died. Very little people came to his funeral, but he got to bury him. But what was cool was that prior to it happening, I'm fairly certain, I could be reading this, I could be mixing my stories. I'm fairly certain he gave him baptism on his deathbed, and and just
welcomed him to the Catholic Church, which is just a beautiful example of, you said this word, accompaniment, one or two times. That may not be a word that people are familiar with, but I think what you mean by that is to truly walk with people and to get your hands dirty.
Oh yeah, I'm all about it.
And so to really get to know them, to gently challenge them, but to love them all the way through that process. And I love to hear that even though this man was an outcast in society, and that many people were uncomfortable with this man, the priest and the daily mass goers were able to show him a love and a kindness that he had experienced nowhere else. So much so that even when his family betrayed him, he was able to find refuge and solace in the Catholic Church, and eventually leading to an authentic conversion right before his deathbed.
Right, which I think is really beautiful to remember, that no conversion is far off. That it can happen right now in this moment, and that Jesus can work however the heck he wants to work, and he can work through us if we allow him to, right? It's all about us allowing him to work through us too. But that I think, I think it goes to show that, so as a campus minister at my past university, that's what I did. I accompanied people. I walked with them. I got my hands dirty. I had the nickname Gutter Girl because I would find the people in the gutters and pull them out. And
wow.
Not actually. It's imagery. It's not. I wasn't actually pulling people out of the gutter. But I was finding the mess of the mess, and I would walk with them because I was there at one point, right? Like I was in the gutters at one point.
Which was your source of mercy.
Right, for sure. And so whenever I had many lesbians, gay people. I've had transvestites in my office before, and I've been able to walk with them in such a beautiful, particular way because I've first come at it with compassion and pity, and that's only because of the Lord, right? Because he showed me mercy and pity when I was in my weakest and lowest and darkest times. And so because of that, again, I can't expect these people to be in full communion with the church, and that's okay. I don't need to expect people to be in full communion with the church. I have to show them who Jesus is, right? And then pray, right, as like another responsibility that I have if I'm walking with someone is praying for their conversion, praying that Jesus wrecks their heart, in a way that I can't, because I'm human. I suck.
No, you don't.
I'm striving. I'm striving.
So, in summary, I hear you say we need to distinguish between the orientation and the activity, or another way to put it is the person itself and the sin. Correct. But as we approach these conversations, we do so with humility and grace, with a desire to have an ongoing, long-term accompaniment where we walk with these people so that hopefully they have an authentic encounter with Jesus Christ, and so that hopefully Jesus Christ can inspire them and lead them to where they need to be. So a difficult conversation again, and Brandon does a great job of giving us more resources. So if you're struggling with this issue, or you know someone that is, again, in this chapter, plenty of other resources within it to direct you on furthering that conversation. Why don't we close with just a few words on the divorced. That is the final objection. I know we didn't get to all of them, but perhaps we can end on that one today. That there seems to be a misunderstanding, in fact, commonly misunderstood, that if you're divorced, you are not welcome in the church. So can you maybe speak into that a little bit?
I feel like I'm going to say the same things that I've said for all the other ones.
But
yes, for sure.
What do we say to someone who might be watching that might be divorced? Are they welcome in our church?
Yeah, 100%, 110%.
Yeah.
Jesus loves you. Jesus cares for you. Jesus wants you. And I think that if we start to, we have to think of the church as the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah.
We have to think of the church as Jesus' bride, as Father likes to say. And if it is Jesus' bride, then she is compassionate, she is loving, and she wants, the nastiest of the nastiest, the gross of the gross, like the worst of the worst, if like that's what people would deem that as, which I don't think anybody would, right? But Jesus wants everybody in his longing presence. Jesus wants everybody to be eyelash to eyelash with him. And I think when it comes to divorce, there's something so beautiful called the annulment process, right? Mm-hmm. Which like if you've gone through a divorce, the church doesn't close its arms to you by any means. Does the church have stipulations? Sure, because the church wants you to be in full communion, in the sense of we don't want you to be in a serious moral state of sin when receiving Jesus Christ. But the church has this very beautiful thing called an annulment process, right? And Father, I'm sure you can speak into this too. Like, an annulment is the church showing the divorcees her love by saying, like, we love you and we care for you, and just because you were married in the Catholic Church, we want to have this broken relationship fixed. Because going through any divorce, I don't care what happened, in the sense of, like, I don't care what happened, it hurts, right? Like, it doesn't matter what happened, it hurts, and it's hard, and it's hard for every person that's involved in it, family members, children, if there's children in it, and the two people who are going through the divorce. It's extremely gut-wrenching, it's extremely emotionally tolling and hard, and what I think is the most beautiful is being able to go to the church and finding this comfort of, like, okay, I'm broken, this relationship was broken, and being able to turn to Jesus and say, I'm broken, and him being how he is, like with the Samaritan woman that comes up to the well, and he's like, I can give you all of me, take all of me. And what does the Samaritan woman do? She leaves her jug where she was filling up her water, and she runs to the town and tells them about her, right? And tells them about him. And so when it comes to divorce, I can't explain it because I've never been through it, but I can't explain. I'm sure that it is so gut-wrenching and hard that, but I think what's beautiful about it is the annulment process that the church so beautifully gives to people going through that, because Father, again, like, you could probably speak better into this than I could, but it creates this, like, it molds your relationship with the Father back together, because it's like this healing, like an annulment process is like the healing of the two people's hearts from the church's point of view, if that makes sense. If
Absolutely.
I hit on that correctly.
No, beautifully said, and maybe just some helpful distinctions. If you are divorced and have not remarried and you are not sexually active with another person, as far as the church sees it, you are still in full communion of the church. A lot of people don't realize that just because you're divorced doesn't mean that you have to stop receiving communion. If you are remaining chaste and you have not entered into a new relationship, then you are still receiving communion, confession, all those things. If it turns out that you have already entered into a new marriage, then what we need to do is have a conversation. And you've mentioned the annulment process. An annulment, another distinction, is not something added to the marriage, but instead it's an investigation to determine whether or not a marriage was sacramental. And if it turns out that it wasn't sacramental after the investigation happens, then great, the church makes that declaration, and you are now free to enter into a sacramentally valid marriage. So there's a lot more that could be said on this. Brandon Bott summarizes it really well. But what I hear you remind us over and over again on all of these issues is, yes, we begin with compassion. Most of these moral objections are a misunderstanding about what the church is really saying yes to. And a desire for authentic freedom and a desire for new life and reconciliation. So not a desire to make a divide just because.
Right.
And so our goal is to work together in that process. It's not easy, but we're ready to get our hands dirty.
Amen.
And we're going to have plenty more to talk about and walk this journey together. So,
Amen.
Tiff, it's been great to have you with us.
Thanks, Bob.
The first day of work, we just going right to it. Can't wait for all of you to meet Tiffany this weekend, and moving forward. So, let's see. Final word. One more thing that you want to say, in summary.
Of this whole thing?
I don't know. Just a word to the audience.
Jesus loves you, and I don't say that enough. Like, he loves us. He loves us. He loves us. He wants us in the church. He wants us to experience His beauty. He wants to show you His love for you and His faithfulness to you.
Amen. Love
Yes,
it.
Lord.
We can't say it enough.
Nope, you can't.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, and we'll have one more video next week discussing the final chapter.